Hello and welcome to this part of the process, which we're going to focus on audio. Surprisingly, the one component that is perhaps the most important part of any video, the part that'll make your video successful or not, is actually audio. As it turns out, your watchers will forgive bad video, but bad audio is intolerable. This means that a lot of your effort will be in the chase for making sure your audio is the best it can be. This applies for all levels of videography. First, let's talk about our limitations. We will not have fancy external microphones. We're not going to be able to capture audio separately on a digital recorder and add it later in post-production. We're not going to have hypercardioid shotgun mics, or even if we did have these external microphones, we're not going to have camcorders that have the ability to receive the cables that come from these types of microphones. All of these types of microphones that I mentioned and the digital recorders, external digital recorders, they really do enable the best audio quality that you can get. But I know we can also get very acceptable audio using only our camcorders as a single capture device for both audio and video. And that's what we're going to talk about here, how to do just that. So let's dive in. And this is a very, very important sentence. And I hope you remember this. I'll probably be repeating it a couple of times. Basically, good audio boils down to this. Two things, two elements. One, distance from the capture device, your camcorder, to the people talking. And number two is your environment, paying very close attention to your environment. Well, the distance from the speakers to your camcorder is a lot easier to control than the environment. And here, when I'm talking about environment, I am talking about all of the background sounds. The dog barking, the music playing, the refrigerator, the light noise, the whirring of electronic sounds, just everything that makes up the background noise that we all live with. And the background noise that our brains tune out, but our recorders, our camcorders, will not. So I have 4 tracks here that we're going to take a listen to. This first one, I'm going to bring in a couple of technical things as I discuss how we captured this first one. Now this was a video interview, but we did use external lavalier mics, and you know what those are. Those are just the little microphones that clip to collars. So the distance in that case was around 6 inches. We used a video camera to record, and it recorded video as well as audio, but we also used a digital recorder, and that is what these lavalier microphones were attached to. So we adjusted the level of each speaker before we started recording, and we had them talk in a normal speaking voice, and then the recorder adjusted accordingly. And then we recorded audio separate from video. And later, when we got to the point where we wanted to make a single video, we just replaced the video audio with this digital recorder audio, and boom, we have really, really good audio. Now, that being said, let's talk a bit about the microphone, because that's going to come into direct play in just a second. We'll talk about this. Now, the lavalier mics that we use were directional, and that is called cardioid pickup. Now, imagine a shape of a heart. And the pointy part of that heart, the bottom part, is pointed towards the speaker. And that is where it concentrates its ability to pick up sound. It kind of deflects sound from the side, and that's just the nature of a cardioid pickup. You can also have a hypercardioid pickup, and those are usually your shotgun mics, and they are highly directional. They don't pick up sound from the sides very good at all. However, you have to keep it pointed directly at your sound source, so that requires a bit of effort. The other microphone pickup is called omnidirectional, and that is what you will be directly dealing with because your camcorders are omnidirectional microphones. Those are the internal microphones in camcorders. So what that means is imagine a circle this time, the shape of a circle, and all around the edge of that circle is the sound pickup. So in other words, it's non-discriminating. It will pick up sounds from all directions. And this is okay in a lot of instances, but not so good, you know, for our purposes. But we're going to talk about how to get around that. So we have two types of pickup, the cardioid and the omnidirectional. We're dealing with the omnidirectional, and that's causing our problems. So let's listen to really good sound. This sound, the human voices have all the parts necessary to make it sound rich and real or present. It sounds like these people are right here. So here we go.
Mr. Welch, I wonder if we could start with your early childhood. I understand you were born in 1919?
If you can believe it.
Okay. Can you tell us what life was like when you were growing up and where you grew up and something?
I grew up in a county seat town in the at the foothills of the Ozark Mountains called Searcy Valley. And went to grammar school, primary school, grammar school, and high school there, and graduated in 1936.
Okay, that's the gold standard of audio right there, and I hope you noticed that in these quiet parts, it was very quiet. Okay, so let's move on to this next track, and this was recorded, this was an audio-only interview. It was recorded with a really very nice digital recorder with an omnidirectional pickup. That means it records from all around and doesn't discriminate. This fella used all the rules for capturing good audio. We'll go over that in just a minute because basically it's the same for digital recorders as it is for camcorders. But he had a problem with environment. Let's take a listen and see what his problem is.
Now also, Sister Stephanie, you are a Roman Catholic nun?
Yes, I'm a Maryknoll missionary.
Okay, okay. And you have been in the missionary for how many years now?
70 years.
70 years. Okay.
Okay. Well, this audio is certainly loud enough, and he got close enough to the recorder and he put it in the right place. The only problem is he had a terrible problem with his environment. And in this case, while the environment was quiet, it was too loud. The room was very loud and echoey. And that's typical of a large room with no carpeting or drapes or anything like that. And you can tell that this would be very hard for any audience to hear or to make out what they're saying. And actually, I feel pretty sorry for the transcribers in this case. So let's look at another prime culprit in external, or rather in your environment, and that is the air conditioner. They're ubiquitous. Our brains tune this out, but the recorder doesn't. So this is what you get when you're trying to record and this is an air conditioner just running in the background. You really can't get that out, and it will erode the quality of your sound. So now I'm talking again, you can hear the difference. That's just a prime culprit, and I always have to mention this. So the question may come up, can you record outside? And sure, you can record outside. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just kind of hard to get a quiet place. And that's one of the rules for getting good audio, is to find a quiet place. Why? Well, the background noise can ruin your audio, and our brains tune out these sounds. But the recorder doesn't have a brain, which is your camcorder, and it's going to record everything. Why? It has an omnidirectional pickup. So let's take a listen to we're going to directly listen now to what you typically hear when you record outside. And you hear birds, and there's nothing really wrong with that, I guess, but you can't get that out. And it kind of limits your options of what you want to, what you could use these video parts for in the future. And then there's some traffic noise and that sort of thing. Usually it's a lot louder, but you get the idea. Okay, so we're going to talk about distance a little bit, and this is our setup. I'll define this in my fancy graphic as it relates to how we want to capture our audio. And remember, we're working with the limitation of only having a single source to record both audio and video, which in professional levels is kind of a no-no, but I know we can do it. I know we can do it. I have total confidence. We can do it. So we can do it. Don't let anyone say you can't do it. So here we have our interviewee, which is the red girl, and you're going to be the blue guy, and you're the interviewer, and of course here's our camcorder. It turns out that ideally around 4 feet is a pretty good distance for these types of camcorders to record really good sound. Naturally, like we said, whoever is closer, they're going to sound better at the expense of the other person who will sound lesser, and that's not a good capture strategy. So that's the idea, and of course, here's your camcorder. It's a bit awkward, and you'll have to really experiment with this. And of course, here's you want to be looking at your interviewee, and they want to be looking at you rather than the camcorder, because that's not the effect we're going for. We talked about that. That's more of a host kind of effect, but we don't want that. We want more of an interviewee effect. And we don't want it way over here, we don't want the profile and all that. And while we're on the subject of distance, just a real quick thing. Like as we said, whoever is closer to the recording pickup will sound the loudest and the best. But there's one more little factor to keep in mind, is some people just have a really loud speaking voice. And it would have to be extreme for you to do this, but if they're very, very loud, you want to put it, maybe back off, maybe not make it equidistant. If they're really soft-spoken, you might want to put it a lot closer to them than you. So around 4 feet. Now that's a rule of thumb. Naturally, you can go a little closer or a little further away, but 4 feet is a pretty good rule of thumb. Now there is another way that you can approach this, and that's what is called the documentary film style of interviewing. And that's really simple to describe. It's surprisingly difficult to sustain during the interview, because inevitably you're going to start going back to normal conversation. And documentary film style interview is not a normal conversation. And what it is when you ask the question, you ask your interviewee to respond in full sentences, which is not how we normally carry on conversations. So if you ask them where they're from, in the documentary film style, you would answer in a complete sentence. I am from Atlanta. In normal conversation, you would answer Atlanta. You ask them, where are your parents from? In conversation, they would just give you a single word answer, and in the documentary film style, they would say, my parents are from South America. And you see how that works. There's one big advantage and one big disadvantage to this. The advantage is that you can put the recorder fairly close to them in that case, because in the editing process, you're not going to need what you say to support their answer in context. Some of these answers, well, if they're taken out of context, it's going to confuse your audience, and that's something you want to avoid. So their sentence, by being a complete sentence, can be used without you having to be part of the editing I guess, the editing strategy of, including your question into the clip to make sense of what they're saying. And that's great because it gives you this option of putting the recorder, over here. You'll still be able to hear yourself in the editing process, but the audio is going to be kind of not as usable. However, that's the advantage, but the disadvantage is something you might not expect, and that is during the course of the conversation, inevitably as you become more kind of comfortable with each other, and the question answer, and becomes a kind of it turns into a conversation. And so what happens during the conversation? Well, you revert back to the incomplete sentences, and it just happens so often that it's almost going to be, it's just going to happen. And you can remind them again and again, but I think that just putting myself in the position of the interviewee and seeing this happen, it really is going to put a damper on the quality of your responses. So that's the distance and the kind of dilemma that we face with our single source recording point of your camcorder, recording both audio and video. But it's just following this little rule, trying to use a rule of thumb of 4 feet equidistant, and keep the camera fairly close to the line of sight. You'll do very well. Okay, I have a clip set up here that we're going to play in just a second, and it's going to demonstrate the most common problem with the way that we have to capture our audio. And in this case, of course, our audio is captured simultaneously with our video, so we have a single point of collection, which is just our video camera. And let's just take a listen to this clip and we'll talk about it. Here we go.
¿Y cuántos años ellos están aquí en Estados Unidos?
Bueno, mi mamá llegó en el año 1979, entonces hace 40 y pico años.
Okay, so did you notice that the person asking the question sounded a lot louder than the person answering? And why? Right, distance. She was a lot closer to the camcorder than he was. And this is problem number 1 to avoid. So what we're going to do is place our camcorders equidistant from our speaker and ourselves, or the interviewer and the interviewee. But this is the most common problem to overcome with distance. Okay, so let's review here for a second. We don't have access to fancy recording equipment, but I know that we can have success in getting good audio. Now remember, audio is 75% of the success of your video. So, what are the 2 things? Distance, which we can control pretty well. We're going to try and use a rule of thumb of around 4 feet, equidistant between your interviewee and interviewer, and have your camcorder set, in the middle, so to speak. And if your person is really, really soft-spoken, you'll want to push the camcorder closer to them. And if they're very loud, on the other hand, you want to pull it back a little. But these are extremes. They would have to be pretty extreme for you to utilize that. If you want to use the documentary film style of interviewing, you get your interviewee to answer in complete sentences, which is ideal, but in practice, hard to do. And number 2 is environment. Very difficult to control. And all you can really do to avoid background noises is to move. Or if you're lucky, you can turn off a radio or a TV, or you can turn off fans, or you can just move to another room. If you're outside, that's not so easy, so you have to find a quiet place. That's just utmost. Knowing about distance and knowing about your environment, I promise, will give you very good results.